For years, I tried to forget what happened in that investigation. But yesterday, the phone rang again. The voice was his, Ramon's. The same pent-up breath, the same rhythm as he spoke my name. It wasn't a memory. It wasn't a delusion. It was a real message. And it was impossible, because I saw his body. I held his hand as he bled on the cold concrete floor. I heard the sound his chest made when he stopped breathing. He was dead, and yet, last night he sent me an audio message. Ever since I heard that, I've been at peace. The world has lost its sound. The silence is now thick, noisy. My stomach churns for no reason, as if my body knows something my mind still tries to deny. The air feels heavy inside the rooms. Time drags. And with every step I take, I feel as if I'm being watched by something that doesn't belong on this side of life. My hands tremble for no reason, and cold sweat runs down the back of my neck, even on freezing mornings. There's a metallic taste in my mouth, a memory that insists on returning ever stronger. I relive that day in fragments, not because I want to, but because it seems to be calling me back. And now I can no longer ignore the signs. It all started with a message, but before that, long before that, there were things I didn't want to see, and that's when everything starts to fall into place. As if the pain had opened the door to my memory, and now I'm forced to go back, reliving every detail, every step until the moment everything stopped. Making sense. I didn't choose to be an infiltrator. Nobody really does. We accept it because there's something inside us that never quiets, a restlessness that feels like hunger, an impulse that mixes courage with stubbornness. In my case, it was more than that. It was anger. Anger at seeing dirty people laughing at the law. Anger at watching families being destroyed by avoidable shit. Anger at not being able to sleep with a clear conscience while I knew there were people killing and laughing. With impunity. And this anger over time becomes a kind of driving force. You start to go too deep, deeper and deeper, and before you know it, you no longer know who you are outside the skin you put on to deceive others. I spent 8 years living between two worlds. By day, I was just another in the internal reports. Clean name, regular records, a salary never worth what I delivered. At night, or when the call came, I became something else. A man without a last name, a shadow with a code, an infiltrator. And in this dirty game, you quickly learn a rule no one teaches you in academia. You never, ever trust anyone. But Ramon was the exception. I met Ramon in one of those operations where everyone seemed too uncomfortable to trust even their own leather belt. It was a simple operation on paper, infiltration of a warehouse used for triangulating weapons coming from the north. But the place was more than a warehouse. There was history there, the movement of important people, and the kind of people who disappear with bodies without needing to bury them. I remember the day they introduced us. He extended his hand as if he knew no one would shake it back, but I did. His grip was firm and he didn't look away. And when he spoke, his voice sounded old, tired, but not weak. Face name Cesar, but you can call me Ramon. It's the only name I can still remember without thinking too much. He said this and laughed. A dry, humorless laugh. I understood instantly. We were on the same. Our side, the side of those who had already lost too much to keep asking questions. We hit it off quickly, at first with code words and glances, then with silence. Ramon was the kind of partner who knew when you needed a cigarette and when you needed a gun. The difference is subtle, but those who experience it know it. He had a strange way of always being one step ahead, not arrogant, just alert, a weary predator. I never knew exactly how old he was or what made him take the job. I never asked. And he never asked me anything about my life outside of it either. That was the deal. We saved each other in the field and outside of it. Each of us carried our ghosts however we could. There was one time in a dingy roadside bar when he sat silently, staring at the switched-off television for almost 40 minutes. I was standing next to him, pretending to play with the old cell phone we used as a cover. The light in the room was greenish. a bit sickly, and the freezer made a constant noise like someone else's breathing. Suddenly he spoke, quietly, barely moving his lips. "I dreamed about my daughter last night. She was still alive in the dream. She was little, and she was waiting for me with a little letter." I didn't know what to say. I'd never even known he had a daughter, and in that moment I realized he didn't want an answer. He just needed to get it out, share the burden, and I let him. Sometimes that's enough. From that day on, I stopped seeing him as a mission. A partner. He was more than that. He was a brother in arms. Ramon was methodical, and that irritated me from time to time. He always double-checked the maps, entered different codes into each spare cell phone, and insisted on carrying printed photos of targets, even though he had all the information in his head. Trust the paper. Paper doesn't have a battery that'll run out at the wrong time. I thought it was excessive, until the day one of our phones burned out in the middle of an alley. If it weren't for the crumpled piece of paper in Ramon's pocket, we would have mistaken the informant for the target. We would have died right there. After that, I never made fun of his quirks again. He was also the type who spoke with his eyes. Sometimes, even before an operation began, he'd look at me as if to ask, "Are you sure?" And I'd always respond with a different look. We came this far, and that was how it worked. No more. The trust between us wasn't built on words. It was on blood, sweat, and split-second decisions. Like the time I had to take down an armed man from behind with no time to call for help. When I turned around, Ramon already had the second attacker on the ground, looking at me as if to say, "You took your time." We laughed sometimes. Laughed at the madness, laughed at the lame code names the station gave him, laughed at the disguise he once had to wear, a real estate agent's suit jacket, too tight on the shoulders. I looked like a penguin trying to sell a penthouse in a slum, he said. I laughed so loud I almost ruined the point. But even that was good. Laughing with Ramon was like breathing in a place where air is often scarce. But what struck me most about him was his silence. Not the usual silence, the silence of someone who's silent. It was a silence that carried history. He didn't need to speak for you to feel the weight of things. Sometimes his face hardened in a way that made you want to ask if he was reliving something. I never asked. But he had a scar on the left side of his jaw, near his ear, thin as sewing thread. One day, in a rare moment of vulnerability, he said to me, "That scar wasn't from a fight. It was my father's. He was a police officer too." And after that, he never mentioned it again. I admired Ramon. More than that, I trusted him. And trusting someone in this business is almost like asking for hurt. But we need something to hold on to, even if it's just a little truth amid so many lies. Ramon was that truth for me. And that's why, when they said he died in a simple operation, my stomach turned. Something didn't add up. Something was wrong, because Ramon wasn't careless. He didn't fall into obvious traps. And most importantly, he would never have left me out if he knew there was a real risk. To this day, when I close my eyes, I see the faces at the wake. None of them looked at me. They all seemed to feign grief. But there was a distance, a coldness, as if they were hiding something. I squeezed his daughter's hand, a grown woman, with eyes that seemed dry from crying. She simply said to me, "My father trusted you more than anyone." That hurt in a way I still can't name. And that's why, when I heard that message, that damned message with Ramon's voice, everything inside me screamed. It wasn't just longing, it was anger, it was doubt, it was fear. Because if that voice was real, then something was very wrong. And maybe, just maybe, he knew it before he died. But did anyone else know? Was I the next to find out or disappear? Have you ever had the feeling that someone who died is still trying to tell you something? Because I swear, I wasn't the one looking for it. It found me. And what happened after that message? It's hard to even repeat out loud. Like now and subscribe to the channel, because what I'm going to tell you next, there's no going back. Ramon died in an operation that, on paper, seemed simple. A quiet patrol at a spot known for light drug activity. Nothing major, Nothing that would warrant more than 2 patrol cars and a backup patrol from a distance. But anyone who lives in this world knows that it's precisely when everything seems too calm that death lurks closest. The place was an old warehouse at the end of a dimly lit street, in a neighborhood no one dares call by its real name. The kind of place that smells of mold, urine, and burnt oil. We arrived late in the afternoon, disguised as always. I entered from the west side. Ramon went around. The back, where the hedge formed a sort of undergrowth tunnel. We'd done this before, dozens of times. It was choreographed. He knew where I'd be, and I knew where he'd step. That's how it worked. That's how we survived. But that day, something was off. The air felt thick, as if the entire city had held its breath. And the sounds were wrong. There was no barking dog, no distant radio, none of the usual metallic clangs of warehouses. The silence there was different. It was heavy. I felt it, but I ignored it. Because that's what we learn to do, ignore fear until it confronts us. When I heard the shot, I didn't know where it came from. I just felt a tremor, as if the ground had swallowed my stomach. The radio was silent. I tried calling Ramon, once, twice, 3 times. Nothing. My voice trembled, but my finger wouldn't lift from the radio trigger. I ran, out of instinct, out of desperation, and when I reached the outside corridor, I saw the puddle before I saw the body. Blood was already running down the makeshift gutter on the floor. Dark, thick, a red that seemed to scream louder than any human sound could. Ramon lay on his side, one hand on his abdomen, the other still holding the gun. But the gun hadn't been used. No shots, no reaction. He was taken by surprise, I knew it. His eyes were still open, fixed, as if waiting for me, as if wondering why I took so long. I knelt beside him without thinking. I placed my hand on my chest, like someone trying to put out a fire with their own tears. "Ramon, hold on. Are you listening?" My voice didn't sound like my own. It was higher pitched, emptier. He blinked. Once, just once. And the last time. He tried to speak, but nothing came out, only a hot stream of air that cut my face like a knife. I swear I saw an apology in his eyes. But he didn't have to apologize. I did. I don't know how long I stood there. I think the world stopped for a few minutes. The smell of blood mixed with the rust on the walls, and the heat from his body slowly faded. The first patrol car arrived when I could no longer move. One of the officers tried to pull me away, and I almost hit him in the face. I screamed, "Get your hand away!" It was instinct. They pushed me away, as if I were the crazy one on the scene, as if I were the problem. One of them, a rookie, asked what had happened. I didn't answer. I couldn't, because I couldn't explain. At the police station, the official version was too quick. Recognition error, isolated action, accidental shooting. But I knew the route. I studied the maps. There was no one within range to have mistaken that shot. The bullet's trajectory didn't match. Ramon was hit from behind, in a blind spot, an area that, at that moment, only one of us should have access to, and it wasn't one of the suspects. No one investigated thoroughly. The report was clean, too clean, the kind of clean that only happens when someone high up decides the case needs to die, along with the body. And the worst is that I didn't react. I kept quiet. Because the pain was too great to fight, and because, deep down, I thought I deserved to carry it. For weeks I dreamed of him, of the dry sound of the gunshot, of his frozen gaze, of his last blink. I woke up sweating, my chest tight, my hands searching for the gun on the nightstand. Sometimes I swore I felt his weight beside me in bed. Other times I thought I heard his footsteps down the hallway. Everything around me seemed to remind me of him. The smell of his clothes, the cigarette burn on the window, even the sound of the old fan echoed his laughter. I began to avoid the places he used to go. Then I began to avoid everywhere. I lived in forced silence, trying to pretend I had lost nothing more than a partner. But deep down, I knew I had failed, that something had passed before my eyes, right in front of me, And I ignored it. I should have noticed. I should have felt. I should have done something. And the worst kind of regret is the one that comes without an answer, because you can ask for forgiveness 100 times, but the dead don't answer. But everything changed when the phone rang. Have you ever heard the voice of someone who is dead? I wasn't ready. No one is. You can live this kind of life for decades, with a brace on your chest and fear on your back, and still, when the impossible stares you in the face, everything inside you stops working for a few seconds. I was on a simple routine surveillance watch, monitoring an old renovated warehouse that now housed a cooperative. Just a facade, of course. Intelligence suspected irregular nighttime traffic, trucks entering empty and leaving heavy, without a receipt. It was cold, silent work. In the car, only the crackle of the old plastic on the dashboard and the muffled sound of breathing inside the vest. It was almost midnight when the phone screen lit up. A brief vibration, a single notification. The name appeared unceremoniously. Ramon, the same old profile picture, the same dry handwriting we used on shifts. I froze. Reflexively, I dropped the phone between the benches. The sound of it falling brought me back, and with it a nausea that wasn't from hunger. I picked up the phone with trembling hands, as if it were a gun pointed at me. It was an audio message. 1 minute and 12 seconds. I stared at the screen. I didn't open it right away. Something inside me told me that if I pressed play, something would change, and it would change forever. The world outside remained the same, a streetlight blinking in the distance, a dog barking from time to time, the distant sound of a truck. But inside that car, time had frozen. It was like being buried in silence, with my eyes open. When I finally pressed play, the sound that came out wasn't what I expected. It wasn't just Ramon's voice. It Wash, the way he spoke during operations, direct, focused, with that heavy breath between sentences. He'd say, 118 3rd Street, in the back warehouse, 2 men, one goes by Mendez, the other, I haven't identified him yet, but he's in command. They're moving the cargo on the 17th after 10 p.m. You need to see it for yourself, partner. Trust me. And then silence. The recording ended there. No explanation, no goodbye. Just that tone of someone still on the mission. I stood there, staring at the screen, listening again, and again, and again. Each time his voice said, "Trust me." My chest tightened as if an invisible rope was pulling me down a well I didn't even know existed. I stayed up all night. I compared the number with the old one. It was the same number, deactivated since his death. I had checked it personally on the day of the funeral. His phone had been collected. It was protocol. No one had touched it. And yet, there was the message. I didn't speak to anyone, not then. I knew what most people would say: trauma, exhaustion, auditory hallucination. But it wasn't. I knew Ramon better than anyone in that station. I could recognize even when he was lying in disguise. That voice was his, and he believed the information was real. The next day, I ignored all protocol. I picked up the car without a scheduled departure, turned off the backup car's GPS tracking system, and drove to the address, 118 Rua Tres. At the end of the street, a graffiti-covered warehouse, rusted iron doors, and trash piled up on the left side. It was the kind of place every neighborhood cop has seen 1,000 times, and that's why no one looks at it again. I didn't go in, not then. I parked far away, watched. I saw a dark car arriving around 11 p.m. 2 men got out, one of them holding a clipboard. The movement was brief. Silent, doors opened and closed. Then they disappeared inside. I could only see one of them in profile, and the name Ramon said Mendez, stuck in my mind like a thorn in an open wound. I returned the next day. I pored over the headquarters. Internal documents, pulled up names, old police reports and archived investigations. I found Mendez associated with an investigation closed for lack of evidence 3 years earlier. The detail that stopped me was that the officer responsible for handling the case was the same one who now works in the intelligence sector, the one who handled the Ramon death report. I felt the ground disappear for a few seconds. That wasn't a coincidence. It was a pattern that might be repeating itself now, only this time I was still alive to see it. Over the next 2 days, I gathered details. The car seen at the scene was caught on traffic cameras. The license plate was too clean. It belonged to a man who had been dead for 2 years. Neighbors in the warehouse area reported hearing strange noises after midnight, but no one officially complained. One of them, a man with a white beard and sunken eyes, told me something that still sticks in my mind. Sometimes it seems like there are more dead people coming out of there than alive. On the night of the 17th, I went there again, this time armed to the teeth and with a hidden recorder. I waited. When the 2 men appeared, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The man Ramon called unidentified was someone I knew, a former official removed from office for corruption, someone who, officially, should have been living abroad. But there he was, with the same arrogant posture, with the same damned black briefcase in his hand. Ramon's recording had been precise, down to the last detail. It was impossible for him to have predicted this. After he was dead, I returned home that morning with my head spinning, my body sweating, my stomach churning. What was happening was beyond anything I could explain logically. But I knew one thing: Ramon was trying to show me something. And now, the only thing left for me to do was keep listening. The question that kept running through my mind was, how many messages had he left? And even more, what else did he know? The first message left me in shock, the second made me doubt reality, but it was the third that truly scared me. The audio messages began arriving at unlikely times, always in the middle of the night, always from the same number that, according to all police records, had been deactivated since Ramon's death. Sometimes the notification came while I was sleeping, other times while I was on patrol. Never at random moments, always when I was alone, when everything around me seemed to go quiet so I could hear better. The second message came 2 days after the first. Shorter. Ramon's voice was different. It was still him. I'd recognize that timbre even if he'd been buried for 20 years, but there was something in his tone, something missing from the first recording, a tremor, almost imperceptible, as if he were trying to remain calm or hide his desperation. They're using the cooperative as a front, but there's something bigger behind it. People we know, people who wear the same uniform as us. The audio cut out immediately afterward, as if it had been interrupted mid-sentence. I listened to it at least 20 times that night. I tried to understand what he meant. People who wear the same uniform. What had Ramon discovered? Why hadn't he told me sooner? And so it was, day after day, that the audios began to appear, like puzzle pieces that, instead of piecing together a picture, seemed to dig a hole, a deep, dark hole that pulled me deeper and deeper. And the more I listened, the clearer it became. Ramon wasn't just reporting, he was trying to protect me. He knew I was involved without knowing it, that I was surrounded. In the fourth message, he said my name with an urgency that cut through my chest. Listen, please, there's someone inside the corporation passing on information. Don't trust anyone, not even those you think you know, especially not them. The audio ends there. No names, no list. Just that tone, that damned tone, as if he were running or hiding or injured. I stayed up all night. I began to distrust everyone. My immediate superior started looking at me differently, or maybe it was just my growing paranoia. Colleagues I'd shared coffee with every day now seemed cold and distant. I began to isolate myself. I started using 2 cell phones, one with the GPS turned off, one without a SIM card. I started carrying a gun even off duty. He slept with his pistol by his bed. My palms sweated just opening my inbox. It was as if each message was a warning or a farewell. The sixth message broke me, Ramon whispered. His breathing was labored. I saw him, man. I saw it with my own eyes. The guy running the scheme. He was there, in the doorway, laughing. He knew I was listening. He wanted me to know. They don't care about hiding anything anymore. Everything's contaminated. Everything. That's when I understood. Ramon hadn't died in a mistake. He'd been silenced. And now he was using what was left, recordings, automated programming, maybe even some remote system, to tell me everything. Leave me the clues he knew I'd understand, because no one knew me like he did, and no one knew him like I did. But nothing prepared me for the last message. She arrived one morning, drizzling with rain. Her phone vibrated 3 times. On the screen, his name, again. The profile thumbnail, always the same. But the audio had a different weight. It began with the sound of a drip. Then, silence. And then, Ramon's voice, weaker, hoarse, but still firm. If you're hearing this, it's because they're close to you. The dockside warehouse. Don't go. They know. You're next. I froze. The dock shed. It was one of the points intelligence had flagged as suspicious months ago, but never received formal authorization for surveillance. There was always a but in the paperwork. A mistake. A retreat. I'd already requested it twice, and the response was always neutral. Now I knew why. I hung up the phone, my hands shaking. The rain outside seemed heavier, colder. I glanced around the room as if waiting for someone to step out of the shadows. I felt like I was being watched, like a target, like my minutes were ticking away, never knowing which would be my last. Ramon didn't say, "You're next," for drama. It was a sentence, a final warning. And if he knew, it was because he'd already experienced it firsthand, because he died with that knowledge stuck in his throat. It was in that moment, alone in the darkness of my office, my breath caught in my chest and my eyes glued to the screen, that I understood something simple but devastating. What killed Ramon wasn't a mistake. It wasn't bad luck. It wasn't a stray shot. It was people, living people, people still walking the corridors of the police station, people who perhaps were already very close to me, and I was already too in there to get out. Was there still time, or had his message arrived too late? I walked to the warehouse with a sinking feeling. With every step I took on that wet dirt road, the mud seemed to tug at my feet, as if it knew I shouldn't be there. The sky was overcast, and the darkness seemed thicker than usual. It was as if the world had swallowed the moon. I was alone, but every sound in the night made me look over my shoulder. The rustle of a tree, the dry snap of a twig, even the silence, which carried a tension only those who have waited for a confrontation understand. In the inside pocket of my jacket, the recorder was on. On my cell phone, Ramon's messages were saved in an encrypted file, not out of paranoia, out of instinct. It was the only way to ensure that if anything happened to me, it wouldn't disappear with it. The warehouse was older than in the photos reported. The metal structure looked worn, with chunks of roof tile missing and the main door half open. There were no visible security guards or cameras, or if there were, they were well hidden. As I approached, I heard voices, 3, maybe 4, men talking in low tones, but not as if they were hiding something. It was the tone of someone too comfortable. I approached from the side, where tall grass covered part of the outer wall. I lay down on the damp ground, hidden among the bushes, and peered through a crack in the zinc sheeting that led into the shed. What I saw chilled my blood. 3 men, all in uniform, 2 of them with visible badges. The third wore a black coat, but I knew that face. I'd passed him more than once in the corridors of the police station. He was the kind of man who always seems too clean. Neat hair, a leather briefcase slung over his shoulder, a friendly smile at fake events. That smile was gone now. Instead, he spoke softly, quickly to the other 2, pointing to a stack of boxes at the back of the warehouse. Boxes unmarked, unsealed. Nothing. His voice echoed low but firm. This shipment leaves tomorrow, before 6. No one from the patrol will be passing by. The system has already been notified. After that, no one will mention this again. That's when my chest started to ache. Not from fear, from anger, because that's what it was. That's what Ramon was trying to show. That's why he died. They didn't know. They had no idea I was there. They didn't know I'd listened to every word Ramon left. They didn't know he'd recorded everything, that he'd named those involved, that he'd left evidence in the right places for me to find. Gradually, their conversation faded. One of the men lit a cigarette as if he were wrapping up a work meeting. They laughed at something I couldn't hear. They laughed. It hurt, because only someone who has never paid the price of their own conscience can laugh while carrying another's blood on their hands. I left the place in silence, the same way I'd come in. I returned to the car with my fists clenched, my jaw set, and one thing certain: it wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about justice. Ramon trusted me, and now I had to do what no one else had the courage to do for him. But the question that kept ringing all night was simple and cruel. How much longer did I have before they realized I knew too much? It took me a while to understand, to truly accept. At first I thought it was coincidence, madness, a delusion born of grief and guilt, but it wasn't. It couldn't be. Everything was too fitted together, too detailed, as if every step I took had already been mapped out by him long before everything fell apart. Confirmation came slowly, like fragments of a buried truth. Every message, every audio, every piece of information, it wasn't sent in real time. It had all been prepared, scheduled. Ramon had foreseen his own death. I discovered this when I gained access to his old number through a friend in cybersecurity who still trusted me. The messaging app's system contained unusual recordings. The audio messages were scheduled to be sent automatically, using a hidden function, a script, an automation. Protocol most people didn't even know existed. He'd recorded everything in advance, every word, every alert, and he'd set it all to be sent on specific days, based on data only he knew how to obtain. Perhaps movement patterns, perhaps dates related to the progress of the investigation. Maybe he just knew deep down that he was scheduled. He didn't try to escape. He didn't run. He orchestrated his own death as a final scream, as a denunciation that no one could silence. The names he mentioned in the audio recordings matched archived reports, manipulated cargo routes, cloned license plates, and people who were officially off the radar, but actively engaged in illegal operations. A deep, dirty scheme rooted within the very force it was supposed to protect. Ramon used what he had. He knew that even if he reported it while he was still alive, no one would listen. That if he went to the commander, he would end up removed due to emotional instability, as had been done to others before him. So he made the only move possible for someone who no longer wanted to remain silent. He tied everything together with an invisible line and passed that line to me, not as a gift, as a legacy, as a duty. Reviewing the audio, I began to notice details that had gone unnoticed. The heavy breathing, the long pauses. It wasn't just fear. It was pain. It was urgency. He knew time was running out. He knew these would be the last words he would say. He knew I would be the only one to hear, the only one to understand. With the data in hand, I gathered everything. I handed some of it to the investigative journalist Ramon mentioned in one of the last audio recordings, a name that almost escaped me the first time I heard it. I handed the rest directly to the Federal Internal Affairs Department, out of state, out of reach of any internal contacts who might divert or silence the content. What happened after that was fast. Arrests, expulsions, important figures trying to clear their names, cold headlines with terms like Operation Dismantled, Criminal Organization Infiltrated, Corrupt Agents. None of them mentioned Ramon. None of them said what really happened. but I knew, and that was enough. In the end, it was he who delivered justice, not with a gun, with his voice, with the care of someone who knew he was going to die, but refused to die in silence. He didn't want applause, he didn't seek revenge, he wanted truth. And he left that truth alive in the hands of the one he trusted more than anyone else, me. I still listen to the recording sometimes, not because I need to, but because hearing his voice reminds me that he won. That even dead, he did more for justice than many people alive and armed. That courage, when it comes from the right place, doesn't need witnesses, only intention. The folder with the recordings is still safe, the evidence is safe, and the truth is finally recorded. But sometimes, when the night gets quieter than usual, I still feel like he's nearby, protecting me, like you always did. And now, finally, I can breathe in peace. But I never forgot the last sentence of the last audio. Don't let this die with me. Would you have been able to carry that weight? I deleted almost all the audios, not because I wanted to forget. On the contrary, remembering too much was what saved me. But some sounds need rest. Some words weren't meant to be heard more than once. They bleed differently when they return. I only left one. The last, the shortest, the quietest. Ramon's voice is weak this time, as if he knew it was the last time, as if each syllable cost a piece of what was left of him. He says only one thing. If you're listening to this, it's because I trust you to the end. And then comes silence. But not an ordinary silence. There's something there, a barely perceptible noise, a breath, a light, continuous sound, as if someone is still on the other end of the line, waiting for you to answer. Sometimes I put this audio on my headphones and close my eyes. I fall silent too, and I try to hear what comes next, what never came. I don't know if it's longing or guilt, maybe both, maybe neither. Maybe it's just my body trying to register that some connections don't die with time or with death. The truth is, nothing has returned to normal. Justice has been served, or at least what the system calls justice. People have been arrested, papers have been signed, names have been erased, but the scar remains. Not a physical one. Time even deceives us. It's the other kind, the one we carry inside, the one that responds in silence, the one that pulses in the dark when no one sees. There are nights when I wake up with the feeling that someone called me, a whisper that wasn't a dream, a memory that still lives in my flesh. And there are days when, out of habit, I check my phone, hoping to see his name again. Not out of fear, but out of necessity. Some people think this kind of thing needs a supernatural explanation to make sense. But what Ramon did was more than that. It was too human, too real, cold and calculated in a way that only someone who knows they're going to die can plan. He knew there was no way he could win alive, so he set everything up to win dead. And he did. Today, no one says his name in the hallways, not in cafes, not in reports. But I do, even if it's just to myself, even if it's just quietly, when I press play on that last audio. Because deep down, part of me still feels like he's listening back. That breath, that breathing in the background of the recording wasn't just a technical sound, it was a code, a signal, a presence. And every time I hear it, I ask myself, did I delete the right audios? Or did he leave something else? Have you ever felt like someone is still trying to talk to you, even after the breakup? Ramon didn't want to be remembered as a victim. He wanted to be heard, and he was. His messages transformed his own death into justice. And even now, with it all over, I still carry his voice with me. Some secrets never die. If this story has kept you hooked this far, it's because it spoke to something deep inside. Maybe a question, maybe a memory, maybe just that feeling that there are things that haven't been said yet. And if it made you think differently, feel differently, then it was worth it. Now you can make this reach more people. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment below. Voice. So I know you heard everything until the end. I know this story left you breathless, but what comes next is different. It's the kind of thing that doesn't make sense, even after seeing it with your own eyes. There's something in the next confession that haunts me to this day, a detail no one noticed, a presence that shouldn't have been there, a feeling that made me question everything. I tried to ignore it, I tried to forget it, but I couldn't. And when it all revealed itself, it was like falling into an endless abyss. It's darker, stranger, more disturbing, and the more you listen, the more you realize there's something there that shouldn't be there. Click on the video now and see for yourself.